"That DNA test belongs in the trash," Isabel said calmly across the dining table. "Some questions destroy families, better left untouched." No one spoke after that. The crystal glasses remained untouched. Silver utensils rested beside expensive china that suddenly felt heavier than stone. Harrison sat at the far end of the long oak table, his weathered denim jacket looking strangely out of place among generations of inherited wealth. I watched him lower his eyes instead of defending himself, and for the first time in my 70 years, I realized silence could be louder than anger. I had spent decades believing every portrait hanging on those walls represented honor, loyalty, and tradition. The Whitmore estate had survived recessions, scandals, and changing times. We always told ourselves that our family name mattered because it stood for integrity. Looking around that dining room beneath the old crystal chandelier, I wondered if that had ever been true. David stared at his untouched steak as though the answer might somehow appear on the plate. Ethan leaned quietly against the staircase, pretending not to listen, but I noticed every movement of his eyes. James, our loyal butler, continued pouring water with practiced precision, though his hands trembled just enough for me to notice. Thomas Caldwell, our longtime family attorney, adjusted his glasses but avoided looking at anyone directly. Sophia, the young attorney who had joined Thomas that evening, seemed to be studying every face in the room instead of the legal papers resting inside her briefcase. Harrison finally looked up. His gray hair was uncombed as always, his face marked by years of hard work rather than privilege. "I never asked for your money," he said quietly. "I only asked for the truth." Isabel gave him a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Truth," she replied, "depends on who tells the story." Nobody challenged her. Nobody defended him. That frightened me more than her words ever could, because every person sitting around that table seemed to know something I did not. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Strange how age teaches you that panic solves nothing. Observation does. I looked from Harrison to David, from David to Ethan, and finally toward the small white envelope resting beside Thomas's leather briefcase. It contained one simple laboratory report, just a DNA test, just a few printed pages. Yet somehow every person in that magnificent dining room behaved as though the paper carried enough weight to collapse an empire built over generations. At that moment, I understood something I should have realized years earlier. Families rarely fall apart because of strangers. They crumble because ordinary lies are protected for far too long, until one ordinary piece of evidence quietly refuses to stay hidden. That night, I could not sleep. The old grandfather clock echoed through the hallway every hour, each chime reminding me how easily certainty disappears. I wandered through the Whitmore estate wearing my favorite pastel cardigan, running my fingers across polished wooden railings that my late husband had insisted be restored instead of replaced. He used to say that old things deserve patience because they always carried a story. Standing alone in that silent house, I began wondering whether every story I had believed was only half true. The family photographs lining the staircase suddenly looked different. Every smile seemed carefully arranged. Every holiday gathering appeared almost rehearsed. Harrison was missing from nearly every frame. At the time, I assumed he preferred staying behind the camera. Now I questioned whether someone had simply decided he did not belong inside the picture. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea in the kitchen. James was already awake. He looked surprised to see me before sunrise, but he quietly placed fresh cream beside my cup without asking a single question. He had served this family for more than 30 years. He knew when silence was more comforting than conversation. Before returning upstairs, he hesitated for only a second. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said softly, "sometimes the oldest records tell the newest truths." Then he excused himself before I could ask what he meant. His words stayed with me all morning. After breakfast, I walked into the East Library, the one almost nobody visited anymore. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight as I opened cabinets filled with leather albums, property records, handwritten letters, and forgotten ledgers. I told myself I was only organizing old papers, but deep inside I knew I was searching for something I could not yet name. Around noon, Ethan quietly stepped into the room, carrying 2 storage boxes. He smiled politely before setting them on the table beside me. "Grandma," he said, "I found these in the attic." They were marked with Grandpa's handwriting. I looked down at the faded ink. One word had been written across the lid in careful block letters. Confidential. Ethan lowered his voice. I almost gave them to my father, but after last night's dinner, I thought you should see them first. I looked into my grandson's eyes and recognized something I had not seen at that table the evening before. He was not driven by anger or greed. He genuinely wanted answers. For the first time since that unsettling family dinner, I realized I was no longer searching alone. The boxes smelled of cedar and old paper, the unmistakable scent of memories that had waited decades to be opened. Ethan carefully brushed away a thin layer of dust before placing the first binder in front of me. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Some silences deserve respect. I slowly untied the faded ribbon holding the documents together and immediately recognized my late husband's handwriting across the inside cover. He had always written with remarkable precision, every letter standing perfectly upright, as though even his words refused to lose their dignity. Inside were financial statements, family correspondence, property maps, and copies of birth records reaching back generations. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The Whitmore family had always documented everything. That was one of the traditions my husband valued most. Yet as I continued turning the pages, small inconsistencies began appearing like tiny cracks in polished glass. Dates that did not match. Signatures written with different pins only days apart. One family tree listed Harrison as a distant cousin. Another listed him only as a trusted employee. Neither explanation felt complete. Ethan leaned closer without interrupting. His eyes followed every page with quiet concentration. Finally, he pointed toward a yellow envelope tucked between two ledgers. It carried no address, only 3 handwritten words. Open if necessary. My fingers hesitated before breaking the old wax seal. Inside rested a single letter from my husband. The paper had yellowed with age, but the ink remained clear. He wrote that family wealth could survive bad investments, failed businesses, and economic hardship, but it could never survive hidden lies protected by pride. He warned that one day someone might try to rewrite the history of our family, not by destroying documents, but by deciding which truths deserved to be forgotten. He did not name anyone directly. Instead, he ended with a sentence that made my heart stop for a moment. If the day ever comes when a DNA test becomes necessary, trust the evidence before you trust the voices around your table. Ethan slowly exhaled beside me. Neither of us had mentioned the laboratory report since the dinner, yet somehow my husband had anticipated this moment years before his passing. I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the library. Someone had entered the house earlier than expected. The footsteps stopped just outside the partially opened door, and whoever stood there remained completely still, as though listening for every word we might say next. The door opened slowly before either Ethan or I could speak. James stepped into the library carrying a polished silver tray with fresh coffee, but I immediately understood that the tray was only an excuse. He closed the door behind him with unusual care and looked first at Ethan, then at me. His expression remained respectful, yet there was a quiet determination I had never seen before. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, "I believe it is time someone stopped protecting the wrong people." He placed the tray on the reading table and reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. From it, he removed a small brass key, worn smooth from age. "Your husband gave this to me almost 15 years ago," he explained. "He instructed me to keep it hidden unless you ever began asking questions about the family records." My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the key. It carried a tiny engraved number that matched the lock on an old cabinet standing against the far wall of the library. I had walked past that cabinet thousands of times without ever noticing it was locked. Ethan quietly unlocked the glass door while I inserted the key into a much smaller compartment hidden behind the lowest shelf. Inside rested several sealed envelopes, a leather journal, and a velvet pouch containing an antique signet ring I had not seen since my husband's funeral. I carefully opened the journal first. Unlike the formal ledgers, these pages contained personal observations. My husband had written about family gatherings, private conversations, and moments that had unsettled him over the years. One entry described Harrison refusing to accept money after helping save a failing business division. Another mentioned Isabel strongly objecting whenever Harrison's name appeared in discussions about inheritance or family history. The entries never accused anyone directly. Instead, they recorded patterns. Quiet patterns. Repeated patterns. the kind that only become meaningful after many years. As I continued reading, one sentence stood out above every other line. The greatest danger to this family is not the truth itself. It is the fear of where the truth might lead. I slowly closed the journal and looked toward Ethan. He had reached the same conclusion without saying a word. Harrison had never behaved like someone chasing wealth. If anything, he had spent years avoiding recognition. That realization made Isabel's determination to silence every question seem even more difficult to understand. James finally broke the silence once again. "There is one more thing," he said quietly. "Mr. Whitmore arranged for an independent laboratory to keep duplicate DNA records under legal protection. Thomas Caldwell knows where they are. Whether he chooses to tell you willingly is another matter entirely." I looked down at the small brass key still resting in my palm and realized it had opened far more than a forgotten cabinet. It had unlocked the first door leading toward a truth that someone had been trying to keep buried for decades. The following afternoon, I invited Thomas Caldwell to the estate under the simple pretense of reviewing several old trust documents. He arrived exactly on time, carrying the same worn leather briefcase I had seen at countless family meetings over the years. His silver hair appeared a little thinner than I remembered, and there was a heaviness in his eyes that had not been there before. We met in the sunroom instead of the formal office. I wanted natural light, open windows, and no audience. Ethan remained nearby in the library, while James quietly served coffee before disappearing without a sound. Thomas wrapped both hands around his cup, but never took a sip. He seemed to understand that this conversation had been waiting for many years. I placed my husband's journal on the table between us without opening it. His expression changed immediately. He recognized the worn leather cover at once. "I did not know you had found that," he said softly. "Neither did I until yesterday," I replied. "Now I need you to tell me why my husband believed duplicate DNA records had to be protected." Thomas looked toward the garden for several long seconds before speaking. "Your husband trusted facts more than family politics," he finally answered. "He believed that someday emotion would cloud judgment, and only evidence would remain reliable." His words were careful, almost rehearsed, but they carried the weight of someone who had protected another person's promise for a very long time. I asked him one simple question. "Is Harrison truly who this family has always claimed he is?" Thomas did not answer immediately. Instead, he removed his glasses and polished the lenses with a folded handkerchief, a habit I had watched him repeat whenever difficult decisions stood before him. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said at last, "I cannot reveal protected records without following the legal instructions your husband established. However, I can tell you that several people have spent years believing a version of history that may not be complete." Those words settled quietly between us. They were not a confession, yet they were far more revealing than a denial. I noticed Thomas glance toward the hallway just once before lowering his voice even further. "There is someone else who already knows more than you realize," he said. "She has known for years, and she has worked very hard to prevent those laboratory files from ever being discussed." I did not have to ask for a name. Isabel had opposed every conversation that drifted toward Harrison from the very beginning. As Thomas slowly closed his briefcase, I realized that the truth was no longer hidden behind missing documents. It was hidden behind carefully managed silence, and silence was beginning to lose its power. After Thomas left, the house became unusually quiet, as though every room was waiting for the next move. I did not feel angry. I felt awake. There is a difference that only comes with age. Anger clouds judgment. Awareness sharpens it. I carried my husband's journal back to the library and read every page again, this time paying attention not only to what he had written, but also to what he had chosen not to write. He never accused anyone directly. He simply recorded dates, conversations, and observations with remarkable patience. It reminded me of the way he managed business negotiations. He believed facts eventually spoke for themselves if given enough time. Ethan joined me shortly before sunset, carrying a notebook filled with his own observations. I smiled when I realized he had inherited his grandfather's habit of organizing information instead of reacting to it. He had created a timeline beginning almost 20 years earlier. Every major disagreement involving Harrison appeared alongside moments when Isabel gained greater influence over family decisions. Separately, each event seemed ordinary. Together, they formed a pattern that neither of us could ignore. Harrison had quietly accepted every insult, every exclusion, every change to the family narrative without asking for sympathy. That puzzled me more than anything else. Most people defend themselves when falsely judged. Harrison had simply continued showing up whenever someone needed help. I remembered how he repaired damage on the estate after everyone else had gone home. I remembered him attending every family funeral while standing respectfully in the back row. I remembered birthdays where he delivered thoughtful gifts but always left before the photographs were taken. At the time, I assumed he preferred privacy. Now I wondered whether someone had carefully taught him to remain invisible. Later that evening, James knocked softly before entering the library. He carried an old photograph inside a protective folder. "I found this behind a loose panel while cleaning the west hallway," he explained. The picture showed my husband standing beside Harrison nearly 30 years earlier. Both men looked much younger, smiling naturally in work clothes rather than formal suits. On the back of the photograph, my husband had written a simple sentence: "Some bonds are stronger than names." I traced the faded handwriting with my fingertips. Ethan quietly looked over my shoulder before speaking. "Grandma, if grandfather wanted you to discover all of this, then he also wanted someone else to hear the complete truth." I nodded slowly. The next family dinner had already been scheduled for Sunday evening. Isabel expected another ordinary gathering where difficult subjects would once again disappear beneath polished manners and expensive silverware. This time, however, I intended to arrive carrying questions that could no longer be quietly placed back inside a locked cabinet. Sunday arrived wrapped in the kind of quiet confidence that often comes before life changes forever. The long oak table had been prepared exactly as it always was. Crystal glasses reflected the chandelier above. Fresh flowers stood perfectly arranged in the center. Every chair waited in its familiar place, preserving the illusion that nothing inside this family had shifted. Yet I knew everything had already changed. I arrived early and took my usual seat without announcing anything unusual. Ethan sat across from me, calm but attentive. James moved through the dining room with his usual grace, though I noticed him glance toward me only once. It was enough. He understood that tonight was not about confrontation. It was about allowing truth enough room to breathe. Harrison entered quietly a few minutes later. He nodded politely to everyone before choosing the chair farthest from the center of the table, exactly as he always had. Watching him settle into that distant corner suddenly filled me with sadness. How many years had he accepted being treated like a visitor inside a house where he clearly carried invisible history? David appeared tired, his shoulders heavy beneath his dark suit. He greeted everyone with forced politeness before immediately turning his attention toward business matters, as though ordinary conversation could prevent uncomfortable questions from surfacing. Isabel entered last. Elegant as always, she carried herself with effortless confidence. She kissed David lightly on the cheek, smiled warmly at the others, and thanked James for preparing another beautiful dinner. Anyone seeing her for the first time would have admired her composure. I almost admired it myself. Almost. During the first course, conversation drifted toward investments, charitable events, and renovations planned for one of the family properties. I listened without interruption. Sometimes people reveal themselves most clearly when they believe no one is paying attention. Isabel naturally guided every discussion. David deferred to her opinions without realizing it. Harrison remained mostly silent, offering only brief answers whenever someone addressed him directly. Ethan quietly observed every exchange, occasionally making notes on his phone without drawing attention to himself. Halfway through dinner, I noticed something that my husband would have recognized immediately. Every time Harrison attempted to speak for more than a sentence, Isabel smoothly redirected the conversation elsewhere. She never interrupted him directly. She simply replaced his voice with another topic before anyone noticed what had happened. It was subtle, polite, nearly invisible, yet once I saw the pattern, I could not stop seeing it. I gently set my fork beside my plate and looked around the table. Nobody seemed prepared for what I intended to ask next. I folded my hands calmly, met Isabel's eyes without anger, and said in the same quiet voice my husband once used during difficult negotiations, "Before dessert is served, I believe our family deserves to discuss something that has remained silent for far too many years. : Every conversation around the table came to a complete stop. Even the gentle sound of silverware touching porcelain disappeared. Isabel looked at me with the same composed smile she had perfected over the years, but I noticed the brief hesitation before she answered. "Of course," she said pleasantly. "If something is troubling you, we should discuss it." Her voice remained warm enough to sound sincere, yet I could hear the careful precision beneath every word. She was already deciding which version of the truth she intended to protect. I nodded slowly and reached beside my chair for the leather journal that had belonged to my husband. I did not open it immediately. Instead, I rested one hand on the worn cover, allowing everyone at the table to recognize it. Thomas lowered his eyes the moment he saw it. James quietly stopped beside the fireplace without interrupting. Ethan remained perfectly still. Harrison looked genuinely confused, as though he had no idea why that old journal had suddenly become important. Before he passed away, I began softly. My husband believed that one day this family would face a choice between comfort and honesty. David frowned. "Mother, what does this have to do with dinner?" I looked at him with kindness instead of disappointment. "Everything," I replied, "because families do not fall apart during arguments. They fall apart when uncomfortable questions are never allowed to be asked." I carefully opened the journal and read only a few lines. Nothing accusatory, nothing dramatic. Just my husband's observation that facts deserve patience and that hidden truths always demanded a greater price with each passing year. Isabel folded her hands together. "Those are thoughtful words," she said calmly. "But surely they do not require reopening painful history." That sentence revealed more than she intended. I had never mentioned the past. She had. Ethan quietly noticed it as well. I could tell from the way his eyes briefly met mine before returning to Isabel. Harrison shifted uneasily in his chair. "If this discussion concerns me," he said gently, "I would rather everyone enjoy dinner. I have never wanted to become the source of division." His humility filled the room with unexpected sadness. Even now, after years of being kept at a distance, he worried more about protecting the family than protecting himself. I slowly reached into my folder and removed a sealed envelope bearing the logo of the independent laboratory my husband had trusted. I did not open it. I simply placed it beside the journal where everyone could see it. No one spoke. No one reached toward it. Yet every person at that table understood exactly what rested inside that ordinary white envelope. And for the first time in many years, silence no longer belonged to those who had guarded it. No one reached for the envelope. It remained exactly where I had placed it, plain and ordinary, yet somehow more powerful than every portrait, every deed, and every fortune connected to the Whitmore name. David looked from me to Thomas, searching for someone willing to dismiss the moment as another misunderstanding. Thomas remained silent. His silence answered more than any explanation could have. Isabel finally spoke, her voice measured and calm. "A laboratory report cannot tell the whole story of a family." I met her gaze without raising my voice. "No," I replied, "but it can tell the truth about one question that has shaped every decision made in this house." Harrison slowly shook his head. "Please," he said quietly, "I never wanted anyone to fight because of me." I turned toward him with a gentle smile. "This has never been about creating conflict. It has always been about ending it." Ethan carefully slid the envelope a few inches closer to me without opening it. He understood that timing mattered. My husband had taught us both that evidence should never be presented in anger. It should be presented when everyone has finally run out of excuses. James quietly collected several empty plates, giving the family one last opportunity to change the subject. No one accepted it. The room had reached the point where ordinary conversation no longer fit. David leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. "Mother," he asked softly, "did Father know something that the rest of us did not?" I looked at the journal resting beside my hand. "Your father spent years protecting this family," I answered. "The question is whether he was protecting us from the truth or protecting the truth until we were ready to hear it." The distinction settled heavily over the table. Isabel remained composed, yet I noticed the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass before relaxing again. It was the smallest movement of the evening, but after everything I had learned, I no longer overlooked small details. They often revealed the largest secrets. I reached for the envelope at last, running my thumb gently across the unbroken seal. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "Thomas, Ethan, Harrison, and I will meet at the independent laboratory exactly as my husband instructed years ago. The records will be opened through the proper legal process. Whatever they reveal will belong to every member of this family, not because it changes our past, but because none of us should have to spend another day living inside a story that someone else carefully edited. No one objected. No one agreed. Yet as I looked around the table, I realized something had already changed forever. For the first time in decades, the Whitmore family was no longer afraid of the question. We were finally ready to face the answer.